I'm Don Mecoy. I'm the business editor of the Oklahoman and News OK, and I'm joined here today by Steve Lackmeyer, who covers all things downtown, particularly development. And Steve, you have some news today about the Producers Cooperative, which most people may recognize as a big metal building just south of Bricktown.
Yes, you know, this is kind of a odd fit these days, but really it's the historic heart of Bricktown. We've had cotton operations in Bricktown since the earliest settlement of that area back in the late 1890s. It was actually held off by federal troops in those post-land run days for a few years. But the cotton operation started up, and the survivor is the Southwestern Producers Co-op, where they have been both distributing and acting as a shipping point for cotton, but also processing cotton, and they got into processing canola as well. Things have been tough for cotton farmers the last several years with the drought in southwest Oklahoma. And they've decided to go ahead and shut down processing at the mill. It is for sale. And this could open up some significant development opportunities.
Well, it's a really desirable piece of land for development. And I know at one point the owners had asked something like $120 million for that piece of property.
Which was just unheard of. No one was going to buy it in one chunk for $121 million when you have to consider that they also had to do some environmental cleanup, then you got development costs. That just didn't work. What we saw back then also, though, was some play going on with the city. At the time, the city was looking at that site as one of only two sites for a convention center, at least on only two sites the mayor was willing to consider at that time. That site fell out of consideration. The price didn't help, but also egress from the new boulevard, which hits land just briefly at Oklahoma Avenue by the cotton mill, but otherwise it's got very limited access for a convention center. It just wasn't in the cards.
Well, if it's not going to be a convention center, I mean, what could you speculate might land there at some point?
Well, consider the location first. Location is still excellent. And where the boulevard does hit ground, it is enough to have an access point and egress for both the river area, where you've got the boat houses and you've got River Sports Park, which is really becoming a regional destination. And of course, Bricktown, which has long been a regional destination, is definitely the state's premier urban entertainment district. So it's nestled in between those. And then you have to consider that you're going to still see quarter shore development to the west, and you'll see a convention center out there to the west, and you'll see the park. So it's really in a wonderful location. But for a convention center, it just wasn't going to work out for the trucks that needed access and all that. Now, if you start talking about mixed use, maybe some retail, maybe housing, maybe hotels, this has been looked at by some developers in the past. They just couldn't make a deal work. But now the folks at the Cotton Co-op are working with Sooner Investments. They're a very well-known entity in town. They've done several shopping and retail centers around town. And they're working with them to see if there's a way that they can either sell off the property in parcels and do pad site development, or do maybe half now, half later. The good news is there's no need now to buy a new operation location for Southwestern Producers Co-op. They're not out of business, they're just shifting what their business is.
They're moving elsewhere.
Yes, they're moving to Altus, where the cotton farmers are located. They'll act as a point of distribution, shipping, and there may also be some canola oil processing left over, but really what I was told is the cost of processing is really not producing enough of a profit to continue. They were doing a lot of canola oil in the state, but really the canola crops were not coming in to the amount that they needed. And they explained that that smell actually was created by some of the poor quality canola crops that we're getting in the state during the drought. They switched to getting canola from Canada and processing that, but really it's just not enough supply of canola crops to do this viably. So they bought property in Altus already. They're prepared to move. So when someone buys this property, it sounds like they could switch operations and make it available for development fairly quickly.
So the upshot being that at some point down the road, we'll probably see redevelopment of this property, which has been so static for so long,
Right.
As all this other development has sprung up around it. It's
Right.
kind of been an oasis of non-change in that area.
It's from the 1800s. It's
Right.
like our own little bygone era right there off of Compress.
So at some point, something from the 21st century will appear there.
I think so. It's going to be about price. They're not saying what their new price is, but they're saying it's going to be much lower than what they were asking. It's much more flexible than what they were asking. Remember, in their negotiations with the city for the convention center early on, and they did try again in this latest round of convention center site selection to see if they get back in the game. They couldn't. But they decided a cost of just relocating their processing operations cost of around $30 to $40 million. That's gone.
Yeah.
That's not in the equation. So we can speculate, if that's okay, that we're probably looking at least $30, $50 million shaved off the price. That's still steep, even if you're at 60 or 70 million, but you start getting in the game, especially if you parcel it out and do multiple buyers. And that's what Sooner Investments is good at that. They've been known to do these kind of retail developments. So it's listed with Don Hayes Brokerage. And it's going to be a very interesting time ahead, seeing what's going to happen.
Well, and Steve will be covering that as he's writing this story today, and we'll have more coverage in the days and weeks and months ahead of what's going on down there south of Bricktown. And you can see that in the Oklahoman and also on News OK.